Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our conference. I'm starting with a cartoon. If you don't know the Naked Pastor, David Hayward, and his cartoons, I do recommend that you sign on to his website, www.nakedpastor.org, but it'll be on the slides if you want to access them after the conference. I think this is a very good cartoon showing what happens with somebody who's been abused, somebody who's been bullied. They've been put into a cage, but the perpetrator is able to say, how is this abuse exactly if I've hardly laid a finger on you? So what I'm going to do this morning, first of all, I'm going to set the scene. I'm going to give you an overview of what's been happening in the Church of England, looking at the Dignity at Work report in 2008, and then a very quick overview of what's happened in the Church of England since 2008. So what is bullying? There is no legal definition in the UK. However, the one that's most frequently used in employment tribunals or whatever is the one by ACAS. Bullying may be characterised as offensive, intimidating, malicious or insulting behaviour, and abuse or misuse of power through means that undermine, humiliate, denigrate or injure the recipient. Normally speaking, with bullying, it's reckoned that it's a frequent occurrence, it's not just a one-off, and that it continues for 6 months or more. So what are bullying behaviours? They can be physical or verbal. They can include social exclusion and isolation, direct, for example, physical attack and name calling, and indirect behaviours such as spreading rumours, talking behind an individual's back. Bullies and targets may be individuals or groups. Male and female bullies have been shown to use a variety of different bullying behaviours, including physical assaults, which is more likely to be men, whereas female perpetrators tend to be more spiteful, talk behind people's backs, ridicule them and spread rumours. Within the church, there is evidence to suggest that the bullying behaviours of both men and women are subtle, covert and manipulative. And these behaviours include derogatory rumour spreading, slander, intentional exclusion and friendship manipulation. Physical attack is easily identified, but these others are less recognisable and therefore potentially easily overlooked or ignored. Doing nothing is functionally equivalent to condoning violent behaviour. And too many people in senior positions in the church seek to deny, minimise or trivialise bullying by describing it, for example, as a personality clash. This is another cartoon by David Hayward, the Naked Pastor. And I won't read anything out, but it's a very good illustration of what the stages that a perpetrator goes through. And, you know, he's denying what's gone on. So I do recommend that you look at it after the conference. So, bullying in the church. The very first survey looking at bullying in the church was looking at the experience of women priests in 1998. Judy Linus produced a paper for the MSF Union, the Clergy and Church Workers branch, and she discovered that 40% of her respondents had experienced verbal abuse, 37% ostracism and isolation, 23% had been sexually harassed, and 10% physically abused, including being spat at in the street. Also in 1998, in a talk before the 1998 Lambeth Conference, the first woman bishop in the Anglican Communion reported receiving hate mail from her fellow bishops. Now, if you think these things couldn't happen now, a woman priest in a blog post in 2018 reported being spat at in a procession. And she said, "As I processed in, something hit my shoulder. Instinctively, I knew what it was without looking. I knew I had just been spat upon by someone in the church. It still happens." So in 1999, the Church Workers newsletter said that bullying is widespread within the church and endemic. And a priest and his wife who set up a website called BARMnet. They said, following our own experience of being bullied in ministry, the BARM website is intended as a resource for bullied and abused ministers and for anyone else concerned about these issues. And that they hope too that BARM will raise awareness of the plight of bullied and abused ministers and encourage better practice. The House of Bishops produced a paper, and one very important point they made in that paper was the cost to someone of making a complaint may be very high. It's important, therefore, that the church takes complaints very seriously. Marcus Beale in the South London Industrial Mission produced a paper in 2002, Bullying in the Church. And in the same year, the Sheldon Report was published, Affirmation and Accountability. And a key recommendation of that report is to encourage and support a culture of collaboration. A culture of collaboration is a culture in which bullying is unlikely to be used or for anybody to think that it's necessary. If we work together, we don't bully each other. There was a question in General Synod in February 2004. And the Bishop of Chelmsford in his reply said, this issue is outside the terms of reference for the Maclean Review of Clergy Terms of Service. However, the recently issued guidelines for the professional conduct of the clergy touch on relevant matters. I will ask the Ministry Divisions, Deployment, Remuneration and Conditions of Service Committee to address your concerns. In the same group of sessions in 2004, during a debate on the clergy terms of service, in his speech, a synod member said, what happens, for example, when an ordinand requires maternity or paternity leave? What happens when an ordinand is accused of some misdemeanor by a fellow ordinand or a member of the college staff? What happens when bullying may be taking place in a training institution? Should we not have in place agreed procedures in such cases to protect the interests of both training institutions and ordinands, and to save huge expense and hassle as and when such situations may arise? Should we not follow the example of teacher training colleges, where rights and responsibilities are clearly laid out the moment a trainee first gingerly steps through the college door? The Church of England is by law established. Therefore, one MP is described as the Second Estate's Church Commissioner, and questions can be asked of him in Parliament. And in 2003, Ben Chapman, the then MP for Wirral South, asked Mr. Bell if he would make a statement on measures to combat bullying in the church. Now, to my great surprise, Stuart Bell replied, a number of Church of England dioceses have produced their own guidelines for clergy on bullying and harassment, and the convocations of Canterbury and York will publish guidelines on professional conduct later this year. In addition, the national church institutions are committed to an equal opportunities policy containing a formal investigations and complaints procedure. I was extremely surprised by that reply, because in 2003, not one single diocese had anything remotely like a policy about bullying and harassment. And a few days later, Ben Chapman asked questions again of Stuart Bell. And this time, Mr. Bell said, no records are held centrally about complaints of bullying. The clergy discipline measure, when it comes into effect, will provide a means of gathering some such information. In addition, a grievance procedure is being developed that will include provision for the grievance to be referred to an independent referee and also an appeal procedure. Support is offered in dioceses by advisors in pastoral care and counselling who are appointed by the bishops to offer professional help to clergy with particular needs. Clergy who have freehold of office and clergy who hold a bishop's license will, without distinction, shortly be able to use the grievance procedure or the clergy discipline measure to seek redress against bullying. And of course, in 2006 and 2007, the press got involved, and there were large numbers of complaints about bullying of clergy and by clergy in both the national and international press. And I've just given you there four headlines from that time. And again, the reference will be given. You can get them after the conference. They'll be all be posted. General Synod is, of course, a very important place in the governance of the Church of England, and 2006 and 2007 saw a large number of questions being raised. So then what happens? The Church Times did a poll in April 2008, which found that 77% of their 244 respondents had been aware of bullying in their church. And you see the BBC News there were a couple of reports about bullying. And of course, Parliament passed the Equality Act 2010. The Equality Act legally protects people from discrimination in the workplace and in wider society. So this act gives legal protection against harassment. Harassment occurs where an employer or employee engages in unwanted conduct related to the 9 protected characteristics, which has the purpose of or effect of violating another person's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment for that person. And the 9 protected characteristics are disability, gender reassignment, marriage and civil partnerships, pregnancy and maternity, race, religion or belief, sex or sexual orientation. So how does the Church respond? In 2008, the Deployment, Remuneration and Conditions of Service Committee of Ministry Division produced the report Dignity at Work, working together to reduce incidents of bullying and harassment at work. Copies went out with a letter dated the 28th of May 2008 to all bishops, archdeacons, diocesan clergy chairs, diocesan lay chairs, and diocesan secretaries. It was signed by John Packer, the then Bishop of Ripon and Leeds, who was chair of DRACS. And he said, "I hope that copies can also be sent to area and rural deans. It would be most helpful if diocesan secretaries could let us know how many copies they need for their area deans, and we will send them to diocesan offices for local circulation." That was the end of May 2008. In September 2008, I contacted all diocesan secretaries. Some didn't remember receiving any copies, but too many said, "Oh yes, we've lots of copies here. We didn't know what to do with them." Now, I thought John Packer's letter was quite clear, but clearly they didn't think so. And again in General Synod in July 2009, a question was asked: when will the booklet be sent to all members of the General Synod? And when will there be a debate and or presentation of it in General Synod, given that the chair of the Business Committee said in her reply to the debate on the agenda in July 2008, "I am sure the Ministry Division may well be bringing that to us, and it will indeed be welcomed." In his reply to the 2009 question, the then Bishop of Norwich, replied, "The booklet is available to download on the Church of England website. Any decision about a date would, as we already knew, be a matter for the Business Committee." Now, I was a part of the group preparing this booklet, and I was very, very disappointed that despite presenting evidence to the contrary, there are two major errors in it. First of all, that bullying is rare, which is said in the foreword and on page 1. And secondly, that in the first instance, an informal approach should be attempted with the target meeting the perpetrator. This is contrary to all research. The bullying will almost certainly escalate following such a meeting. If such a meeting is deemed favourable, there are two caveats. One, the target should never be alone, but should have somebody else with them. And secondly, if the bullying is identified at a very early stage, it may be that mediation is a possibility. But if the bullying is not defined early, it is not recommended. One participant in a study said, "Being asked to be in the same room as my perpetrator is like being asked to be in the same room as my rapist." In November 2009, the then Archbishop of Canterbury, Rowan Williams, was asked to speak at a conference organised by the TUC. And this is his response to a question from the floor about bullying in the church. The question of bullying, I'm glad you raise it because it's unfinished business for us. And I'm very glad that it's flagged up. It is an issue. I have good reason to know from pastoral contact with people how much of an issue it can be. And I wish we were better at that. How else does the church respond? Well, in 2010, a day course was devised for current and new bishops in the Church of England. It was intended to help bishops understand about harassment and bullying and policies and how to put them into practice, and to examine and practice various skills appropriate for dealing with a range of difficult situations. Unfortunately, no bishops applied to go on the course. It was then open to all senior staff in each diocese, but still nobody applied. The course was cancelled. It has not been repeated. So what's happening now? Questions are still being asked in General Synod. Newspapers, as I'm sure you know, are still putting stories of bullying in the church into the public domain. But most importantly, people are still leaving our churches because they are being or have been bullied. And the physical and psychological damage inflicted by bullying is as serious as ever. Now, as we know, the 2008 Dignity of Work report was out of date from October 2010 with the implementation of the Equality Act. I've been asked about getting it updated since 2012. It is now being discussed and will be updated. In fact, in the July 2020 group of sessions, a question was asked at General Synod: who is responsible for updating the Dignity at Work policy so that it complies with the 2010 Equality Act? In his reply, the Bishop of Hereford cited the amount of work being done by the House of Clergy in their review of clergy remuneration. And he said this: "This amount of work limits our ability to carry out other work, but we shall do this as soon as we can." So in other words, pay trumps damage. The commercial world has had to take bullying and harassment seriously because of the costs of litigation and payouts. In 2006, Deutsche Bank had to pay damages of almost £1 million to Helen Green, one of their employees, plus, of course, their and her legal costs. I understand the total cost of what Deutsche Bank was around £6 million. Payouts in the church are less frequent and rarely run into six-figure sums. As with sexual abuse, the church is becoming almost a laughingstock in the real world. The reputational damage to the church, the damage to individual people, the damage to their health, their families, their faith is incalculable. The cost to the church of training clergy who leave because of being bullied is very high. The Anglican Church in Australia has suggested that the commonest reason that clergy leave the church is because they're being bullied. Going to church is now viewed as a leisure activity in census data, For us, faith in Jesus Christ, following in his footsteps, is a way of life. So why does the church find it so difficult to deal with bullying? Well, I suggest there are 6 main reasons, so of course there are almost certainly others. The culture of an organisation defines those behaviours deemed appropriate or inappropriate within the organisation. Churches aspire to the culture of a community striving to follow in the footsteps of Jesus Christ, where love is the hallmark of the Christian. As Tertullian said in the 2nd century, see how these Christians love each other. Abusive behaviours of any sort are therefore completely unacceptable. Language, the ways in which we label, define, categorise or speak about an issue is crucial to the ways in which we understand not only the issues, but also how we should deal with them, both as individuals and as a community. The way language used is very important. One of the problems in the UK is that we associate bullying with children in schools. We are adults, so can therefore be neither perpetrators, targets, nor bystanders. If we think we're being targeted or have witnessed bullying, we must have misunderstood. Complaints about bullying are therefore viewed as an expression of the target's own inadequacies to cope with normal interactions. And this is reinforced by remembering our childhood when telling tales, that is, reporting bullying behaviour, is despised. It's much easier to deny or trivialise any bullying behaviours brought to our notice. Belief that the world is just enables us to view our environment as stable and orderly. Good things happen to good people, and therefore bad things happen to bad people. A belief in a fundamentally fair world is a comfort, a way of maintaining the vital illusion that we, the healthy and prosperous, are not just lucky, but somehow deserving. Moral disengagement allows us to convince ourselves that normal ethical standards of behaviour don't apply in a particular context. It's moral disengagement when bishops do nothing when they know a particular cleric is sexually abusing children or adults. It's moral disengagement when bullying is trivialised as banter or teasing or a personality clash. It's moral disengagement which allows known abuse to continue without calling the abuser to account. Darvo. That's the response that perpetrators of wrongdoing make when confronted with their behaviour, whether as individual or institutional. Offenders frequently make threats and overt and covert attacks on the target's credibility. Comments such as, "I'm not the bully, she's bullying me." Or when an individual has been raped, saying, "She asked for it. What does she expect when she wears clothes like that?" This strategy is outlined in Dignity at Work in 2008. At 3.7, it says, bullies normally adopt a threefold strategy of defense: denial, counterattack against the complainant, and poor me, thereby gaining sympathy and potentially avoiding the penalty of their behaviour. In effect, presenting themselves as the victim and the target as the bully. And then finally, the secrecy and silence and what I call lack of ecclesiastical memory. It's a refusal to accept a behaviour, to sweep wrongdoing under the carpet. It makes bullying the elephant in the room. Never talk about it. Refuse to hear what's being said. The church finds it very easy to confuse confidentiality and secrecy. Confidentiality in the correct place is right and proper. Secrecy is always wrong. So what I call ecclesiastical memory also plays a role. For too long, there's been a culture of new staff, whether a church warden, an incumbent, a member of diocesan senior staff, feeling that they must be a new broom to do new things and to ignore what's gone before. given that many perpetrators are serial bullies, they don't know, because they weren't there, and they don't want to know, that an individual has behaved like this before. They don't want to know that there's a pattern of behaviour which needs to be addressed. The pattern of behaviour might be within a particular parish, or might be the behaviour of a particular person, lay or ordained. And the result is a litany of bruised and damaged people left behind. All of these strategies were mentioned in the ICSA hearings, and they apply to bullying and harassment as much as to sexual abuse. As one bishop said to me, "I don't want to know what you might find, because if I did know, I would have to do something about it." Refusal to address the issue does not solve any problems. And this is my final cartoon from David Hayward. So remember, you always have this working for you. When you abuse someone, the first thing they're going to think is, "I can't believe it." And the first thing others are going to think is, "I can't believe it." You can freely operate inside this bubble of disbelief for a very, very long time. So friends, we must do something about bullying and harassment within the church. It is against the whole principle of what our faith in Jesus Christ means. We have to get to the position where a modern day Tertullian can also say, "See how these Christians love each other."